Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to welcome on stage our moderator for our next panel discussion, which is Planning Connectivity, Trains, Roads, Ports and Airports. Let us put our hands together as I welcome on stage Mr. Manish Aggarwal, Partner, Corporate Finance, Infrastructure and Government Services, KPMG India. We welcome you, sir. I'm sure the tea and coffee break has given us more energy, so may I request all of you to truly put your hands together as I welcome on stage our panelists, Mr. Vikramjiet, MD, Maccaferri Environmental Solutions. Thank you for joining us, sir. Let's also welcome Mr. Asim Tiwari, CEO, BRNL. We welcome you, sir. We also have with us Mr. BVJK Sharma, JMD and CEO, GSW Infrastructure. Thank you for joining us. Let us also put our hands together and welcome on stage Mr. Kumar, Chairman, JNPT. Let's really put our hands together and applause as our panelists, Mr. Sunil Kapoor, MD, Sarr, joins us on stage. And a final reminder to all our guests in the pre-function area to please join us inside the ballroom and take your seats so that we can truly have an engaging panel discussion. I'd now like to request our moderator, Mr. Aggarwal, to please go ahead with the proceedings. Sir?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As we move from a smart cities, the first session, to transportation segment of this particular session, I think the focus more, is, as the session theme is about the connectivity. As I look at it, and we have a esteemed panel with us to cover the various parts of a transportation, right from logistics to airports. But I think the few key things that comes to my mind when we look at this entire connectivity is that today, so far, the way India has really looked at whether ports or the roads or the airports, at least my experience is that we really don't think of a connectivity when we do at a planning sort of a stage. So let's say, if government is looking to award 16 new port projects, I'm not sure whether we have really answered that how these ports within, connects well with the various other modes. And where exactly the hinterland is, where the traffic output will go for, whether we have enough roads there, whether we have a logistics capacity around that. When we are planning for no-frill airports, again, that question needs to be asked, that these airports are coming where, and how will that connect with the center where the traffic of this entire airport will actually flow from or fly to. So I think, there's a larger issue from a policy side of it. When we think of, and obviously there is a good move to integrate the transportation ministry as such, but I think from a planning side, when we look at these projects, what we need to do better and what the experience has been so far, I think that's the one thing that comes to my mind. And then as we move on with the various sectors within the transportation, be it on the roads and the ports or the logistics side, and the focus on our urban infrastructure that we are looking at and club with the railways as well, I will have each of the speaker panels coming in as to how they really need to think when they plan for a project to ensure that there is enough connectivity, because that has a very high implication on in terms of a cost, as also cost of a delivery of a services, and also to free up this capacity which is constrained. So for example, in the energy side, you would have read about this entire linkage rationalization, the work which is going on, because what happens is that if you really do a rationalization of some of these linkages the way it has been done, it not only saves you cost but also releases the constrained capacity of our railways to a large extent to get a new capacity on board. So with that, I will first go to Mr. Kumar. The first thing that as I said is a larger issue is that on the planning side, what has been experienced so far? How do we really go when we think of these airports, when we think of a ports or a roads projects, and where does the connectivity aspect sit there, and who has a responsibility to ensure that when these projects are planned, there is this discussion as to whether we are having a connectivity to the various modal transport. And maybe a question earlier than that, see, when we look at this entire capacity, at a ministry level or a planning level, are we thinking of various modes of transport and saying that from an Indian constraints point of view, what capacity we need to plan for a road, what we need to plan for, let's say, coastal shipping we are talking about, and what we need to do more. That would be, Mr. Kumar, your views, please.
Thank you, Manish. As I was discussing this pre-session, before this session starts, we are having tea, and I told Manish that I am villain of the group. and agree to that. Because today, whatever we are facing, the entire confusion or you can say chaos in the infrastructure sector, this country is hungry for the infrastructure. People are crying for the infrastructure, be it road, be it rail, be it port or airport. They are ready to pay the cost for the infrastructure, but due to the policies, skewed policies, due to lack of mechanism, everybody is suffering. I mean, I am presently overviewing a biggest FDI investment in infrastructure sector in India. 9,000 crore rupees. Port of Singapore Authority is coming and investing at the JNPT to create my 4th container terminal, which is the biggest investment by any country in the India and the biggest investment by the Singapore outside the Singapore. And I know how difficult it is to connect, to correlate and to increase the different, smoothen the crease of the different enforcement agencies, the regulatory agencies, the policies issues. So we cannot have a connectivity unless the so-called people, the so-called departments, so-called regulatory authorities, regulating the sector is connected. Presently there is a lack of connect, there is no connect, or you can say there is a disconnect in the various regulatory authorities, and overviewing the infrastructure development in this country. And why so? There is a background. If you show internationally how things is growing, if you go to the Japan, if you go to the China has recently in that the last 30 years, if you see infrastructure development, the kind of growth they have shown in the infrastructure, that is commendable, but that was possible only because they have the mechanism how to handle it. It's not like in our country where we are having the 3-tier governance. If you are having any project in any place, you have to deal with the state government, you have to deal with the central government, and you also have to deal with the various regulatory authorities created either by the central government or by the state government, who claim that they are independent and they will not follow the dictate of either state government or the central government. So this is the situation. Now what is the solution? You see the coastal and inland. If you compare the coastal and inland has the vast potential. You cannot imagine a city like Bombay, which is an island city, and no inland movement, no coastal movement. The public, the kind of potential the solution is there for the mass transportation in the city like Bombay, through their coastal, through their inland water, from one place to other place. But because there is no policy, nobody has looked toward that. So the solution is that you have to develop a cluster-based mechanism. There has to be like for a particular industrial cluster, if it is possible state-wise, you have to plan in advance that what you want, how it has to be done. You have to connect all those plans and then monitor it regularly. Now, what are the basic pain points, Manish? The basic point for any infrastructure developer presently is land acquisition. The basic pain point for the infrastructure developer is environmental clearance. The basic pain point in infrastructure developer is finance, because you have to depend upon the banking sector where the asset liability mismatch is there. They are looking for the 5 years or 10 years outlook, when your outlook is the 30 years or maybe 50 years. So these questions has to be addressed from the highest level. There has to be a system that how the land acquisition problem will be sorted out. What will the policy? Who is investing in India, either outside India or Indian industry? They know in advance that this is the regime, this is the institute, these are the situation, how we are going to handle it. Similarly with the environment, it's the funny situation. Like I will give a live example. I am struggling last week, struggling from last 2 or 3 days. There is a order from Maharashtra Mumbai High Court that is long, I think 8 or 9 years back this order was there, that wherever there is a mangrove, the mangrove will become a deemed forest. So if you want to remove the mangrove, you have to go the rigmarole of removing the forest. There is nothing wrong in it. Okay, it was a very good intention law, because mangrove is very essential for the coastal region like Konkan and Maharashtra and Ratnagiri. So the mangrove was given a forest status of the forest clearance. So the agency is applying for the forest clearance. Now there is a form for the forest clearance, and in this form it is written that after all approval, the forest department will go and earmark the land and create a boundary and then hand over that land. Now in the case of mangrove, it is in the water. So it is not possible that somebody will come and earmark and put the pole and put the boundary. So forest department, local forest department telling no, I think it is written in the act, written in the regulation that I have to come, I have to create a boundary and I have to earmark the area, then only I will give you the clearance. So we are, from the last 3 days, I am sitting with the Principal Secretary, Environment and Forest, Maharashtra government, and trying to sort out that how to change this regulation. So these are just minor points, and that you think when I am a government agency, you see the the pain for a private agency which is going for this kind of infrastructure development and struggling with the various authority, struggling with your archaic rules and regulations, who nobody is looking up how to change it. So this is the basic problem, Manish. But luckily a lot of things is happening. We are already in the Sagarmala project has already been announced. Again, government is taking up this project, and the basic concept of this Sagarmala project is that in all the coastal states there has to be maritime development cluster, and in that cluster you plan in advance that how your port, your road, your rail, your inland water is connected.
Right.
And first to make a plan for that development of the cluster. Get that authority, this maritime cluster authority, as an empowered authority, with the highest person from the state, maybe Chief Secretary of the state will be the member of that, and similarly at the central level, Cabinet Secretary will be member of that. Make that authority empowered to sort out these kind of questions for which we are going to from each to every agency. So this is the one good step we are taking on that. Similarly on land acquisition also the things is already on the rail, and the people, again there is a relook for that. So I hope that in the near future it will be better condition for the infrastructure developers in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I think very important point when we look at this coastal shipping and the Sagarmala as a project, I think it's important that we plan it well. Otherwise, this has been discussed for ages, and I'm not sure whether it sees the light of a day, because ultimately it is all about connectivity and the various modes of connectivity. If we do that planning well, then probably it will have some sort of a go forward. And good to hear that, that's the thought process which has been there. Coming to Mr. Sharma, I think your views on, how you look at a transport convergence happening across the various sort of sectors. Do you see from a private sector perspective, that's happening? Because we just heard about from a government side, how they are looking about the thought process. And so from the private side, what do you think is happening, and how do you see it likely to shape over the going forward? And also specifically on the port side, while the government has announced in the budget that 16 new ports, how do you really see that part playing out? Because we have seen in the past, from a port side, both from a logistics, and I will come to Sunil subsequently later, and also from the connectivity around the road side, to see that where those ports actually, once the traffic comes in, it's getting actually to the hinterland and their destinations as well, most effectively, so that the landed cost to consumer is within the overall control.
Yes, very relevant and pertinent question, which is today is the transport convergence. While we are talking about connectivity specifically, but the transport convergence is the key today, where we can address our logistic costs. We all know that our logistic costs are hovering around 13-14% and which needs to come down to the competing levels of 8-10%. And while government works on the planning and policy side, private sector will also have to do the bit. But mainly what would address this loss, which is about $50 billion annually, which can go up to even $150 billion, is not going to make the private investment conducive in India. So we all have to get together and bring a model shift in the way we transport goods. Today, in 1950-51 railway share used to be 90%, is now come down to 30-31%. Our coastal and inland water put together is still about 7%. That needs to go up to 45%. And the rail coefficient also need to go up from present 30 to maybe a 45-50% level, and many other things that will contribute for us to compete internationally and bring that confidence of investor that logistic cost in India is not even worse than Vietnam. Today we have even Vietnam logistic cost is much lower than ours. Now opportunity is there. We have the demand, we have the democracy, we have the demography. Willingness of the government is there, and lot of government initiatives are happening. On the demand side, the freight, if you look at the freight in the billion ton kilometers, it's going to rise from 2,000 to almost 10,500 billion ton kilometers. And the domestic air traffic front is going to rise from 60 million to 400 million. And the international traffic of passengers is going to rise from 40 million to 200 million by 2030. We have the demography, young India. Now democracy is ticking. Now, if you see the facts on the ground with the launch of Make in India today, and Mr. Modi and our Honorable Prime Minister giving us clear messages about creating jobs, manufacturing economy, and he specifically talked about enhancing the efficiency of governance. And for us, private investors, we need an ease of doing business, and to address all the PPP issues, to bring the private investment, and institutionalize the synergy between the state and the central government. Hopefully with the elections coming up, it will be more, but I would like to say that all this needs to be done today in a most environment-friendly manner, which will be about 5% costlier, but eventually it will pay for itself. And while we talked about 100 smart cities this morning, there is a need to do a master plan for each sector with a particular target for a model shift, and then create capacity of the region to what Mr. Kumar was talking about, Sagarmala, and that brings the regional development plan into city plan, and then city plan into central plan. And most importantly, good news is that in February, a policy makers got together, and National Transport Development Policy Committee was formed, and first meeting happened in February, and under I think that day chairmanship of Mr. Vikramjiet, there was a specific committee encompassing all of them, like your roads, railway, shipping, aviation, and my only request was to add warehousing, freight forwarding, express cargo delivery, people, container services all along with it. But this is a very good development, and there are challenges, sets of challenges. There are growth side, demand is there, and governance side people are addressing, and there is also, they are talking about energy and technology intervention to bring that, but the approach should be a system-based approach, system-based looking inwards, and also looking outwards to the extent that you connect the borders, which he is concentrating on northeast, connect all the borders, connect the neighboring countries. This will definitely improve our logistic efficiency and the cost. And to meet these growth challenges, we need huge investments. And the total investment in the transport sector in the 12th plan is 7%, but that's insufficient. But we need to look at 9% going forward till a sustainable basis till 2030. And this calls for an industrial growth of 10%. And it's about a 7-fold increase in this, especially the investment in the transport sector. If you see in 11th plan, about 10 trillion Indian rupees were invested. We need to invest about 70 million by the 15th plan, 70 trillion Indian rupees by the 15th plan. Where this money would come from, there is a challenge where you talked about private investment, we are ready. But in the Indian private sector is looking probably invest about 67% of the private sector investment, and about 33% is likely to come from the foreign direct investment. But we need to nudge these transport demands toward the desired model shifts. And to meet this challenge, that logistic convenience, where World Bank and many other rating agencies were rating us at 46th level, and unfortunately we have, in 4 years, we have fallen down to 54th level. So this confidence building measures government is taking, and private sector is looking for this kind of enabling things that the government is doing. Coming down to port sector, we know that 90% by volume and about 70% by value is being handled through ports, and India's world trade, India's portion of world trade share is going to increase from 0.8% to 1.5%. It's a huge, humongous growth in the volumes, and through Sagarmala and many other procedures, we need to have a comprehensive and coherent strategy for location of ports. Otherwise, now central government has ports, state governments are locating ports on their own. There is no national development plan for the ports. That is the need of the hour, and probably 4-6 mega ports to the tune of JNPT going up to 500 million, and such ports which can handle volumes like Shanghai is handling 500, and the major ports should step back and adopt this landlord model, and the dedicated freight corridors should come up very quickly for these 4 to 6 mega ports. I was saying that we have a lot of concentration is on the western linkage of the dedicated freight corridor, but today the eastern corridor has become very important with all the raw material on the east coast now, especially the bulk cargo movement. So eastern freight corridor also is very, very important. And we will definitely, on the private side, we want to invest more. Personally, in JSW, we are going up from 30 million to 200 million, and I'm sure with this launch of Make in India, the EXIM trade imbalance and all that is going to improve much, and a long-term funding and many other enablers which are required will happen. And I'm sure that audience and all of you will agree that there's a lot of change in the policy making, enablers are there. Numbers are yet to be seen on the ground, but from private perspective, I would say that we are very confident that we will achieve the desired growth that we want to achieve.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Very important couple of points you made, about looking at the entire transport convergence very holistically, looking at each mode of a transport in that sense. We are talking of industrial corridors, and again, through these corridors, where exactly the traffic and the goods are moving and where exactly the constraints are, and which mode of transport will work better to address that concern. I think that's how probably we need to look at. You also made a point around the warehousing being included, which is a very important point, because when we plan for transport or the ports, I think without that support, it doesn't really support the economic viability of a port per se, because finally it has to be an end-to-end movement to end consumer, and also the technology part that you talked about. Sunil, coming to you, from a logistics side, and as we heard Mr. Sharma making this point around warehousing as a logistics being an important component, how do you see from a logistics sector as such, this connectivity and the transport planning being a constraint when you start looking at your business models? And how do you feel, from when we are at a stage where we are talking of a really smart cities, connectivity as a focus areas, what do you think could be one or two things that the policymakers or the planners should look at so that the logistics also sit integratedly as a part of overall transport planning, which is currently not the case in that sort of a sense?
You see, I'll just start with this. As we all know, India for any country, logistic infrastructure development is primary if any country wants to move ahead. And we in our country we have a lot of possibilities of logistics development, even infrastructure. 2/3 of the infrastructure is yet to be developed in terms of roads, in terms of ports, air connectivity, coastal movement, which is very important. Yeah, and like just now Mr. Sharma was mentioning that we need to develop the coastal movement is very important, and we as Safreds have now very actively involved in the coastal movement. We are connecting from South India to eastern sector of northeast. We are going to northeastern sector, which is totally aloof. You see, there's no development, there's no industrial growth there, there's nothing. So we are moving. We have developed a multimodal. Sorry.
Sure.
We have developed a multimodal solution. We are moving through coastal, by sea from South India, and we are going to eastern India, and from there onwards we are doing the riverine movement to Bangladesh. We are using the Bangladesh jetty port.
Okay.
And from Bangladesh we are using by road, we are entering northeast, which is Aggarwal. Now this is ultimately reducing the distance by almost 900 kilometers if you go by road. So we need to develop the infrastructure is very, very important. And in India, if you really see, in the next decade, we are planning to invest around $500 billion if we want to achieve a growth rate of 7 to 10%. We need to invest much more. Though government has planned 7 to 10%, 500 billion investment is also looking very small.
Sure.
And if we want to achieve a double-digit growth, we need to be very, very aggressive in building roads, which is a big problem. Our ports are not fully developed, excepting few in western port. Our eastern port are totally, there are no handling facilities, there are no, vessels cannot take berth, and from port to the cities, the connectivity is very bad.
Very bad, absolutely.
Is very bad. And if you go to the interiors, we are talking of highways, if you go to the interiors, there are absolutely no roads. I'll give you the example that one of our clients is facing acute problem to feed northeastern sector because of bad road condition. And
very fair, a very relevant point. And,
so
you know, I mean, sorry.
Yeah. So I feel there is a lot of scope, and we need to develop the road, which is road connectivity is also very important. So is coastal. If we want to reduce the transport cost, we need to work on coastal movement, riverine movement, and rail. We have to shift our focus from road to rail and riverine and coastal movement.
I think on that note, there's a very interesting point, I mean, that Sunil made, and Mr. Tiwari, I will come to you, that, you know, I mean, we are also talking of, I mean, there was a lot of talk on the railway side of things. The budget had a lot of outlay for urban infrastructure. And as we plan for the smart cities, I mean, that connectivity aspect in that particular areas, I mean, which is also very important. I mean, from your experience, I mean, from a roads or a railways or a urban infra side, how do you think, I mean, this entire thing panning out? While we have these outlays, are we still looking at these as a separate buckets, and we are still not looking at it as a more integrated multimodal transport to say which area or which location is more tuned to which particular transport mode, and looking at everything as a complementing each other, rather than saying, I mean, so many ports, so many kilometers of a road that I have to lay down. I mean, are these kilometers of a road we are planning to the stretches where there's no road, and where, I mean, the throughput from a ports to ultimate consumer and is very, very essential. I mean, how are we looking at these prioritizing this today? And what is the way, probably, I think through this forum, I mean, ET can really look at to really put to the government that what's the best way to plan for it. So while you do kilometers, while you do ports, while you do, I mean, airports, but I think where exactly the key stretches are to connect everything so that, I mean, it makes sense for an ultimate consumer.
It's a very valid point, and it has also been touched base by almost every member on the panel so far. The fundamental thing, what we see, a holistic goods and human movement plan in the country is actually missing. And like earlier we were talking about the smart cities, and it just got me thinking about one thing. You know, any human habitat and economic activity is only about three things: spaces, places, and movement. So now you need to develop spaces which are conducive to working. You need to develop places which is a conglomeration of spaces, and then you need to organize and manage movement between the places. Whether that could be intra-city level, which we call as urban infrastructure, or intercity level, which is our national network. Now, though electrical transmission and distribution system is not a very good example to give, but it's a clear analogy. The distribution network of whatever mode of transport you are using, basically the transmission and distribution network, a national transport grid kind of a concept needs to be developed. Where what you do is, now based on that, like I would like to divide the entire discussion in three parts: planning, policy, and execution.
True.
Now, coming on to the planning, that is, I believe, we haven't done a holistic, long-term, multimodal transportation plan.
Absolutely.
Now, what I believe is Mr. Sharma talked about National Transport Planning Committee which has been created. That's a good step forward. However, the way the government is working, the railways, the transportation ministry, the aviation ministry, and the ports, and as well as the urban infrastructure, urban transport, they don't seem to be communicating with each other. Now, in how many cities, all the central railway stations are clocked. They are at the heart of the city. All the goods and major people movement is happening at the heart of the city. So far, in some cities, the effort has been made to decongest that, but it needs to be done at a holistic level. The city's growth, urbanization, has happened more organically than in a planned manner. So that is why resulting in, like Delhi is the greatest example. The biggest flight of transportation system right now in Delhi is the growth of suburban areas. People live in Gurgaon, go to work in Noida. People live in Noida, go to work in Gurgaon. And then the goods movement. There is only one transport nagar which we can, if it is a shame on a logistic hub, everybody was talking about realistic and logistics, but there is only one. Now, there is no consolidated, comprehensive goods movement plan within the city. If people live there, they are required to be fed, they are required to be provided goods. Similarly, the industrial aspects of it. So, the city planning, the national level transportation planning, the industrial corridor and industrial area regional planning, so from urban planning to the national level planning, they need to be communicating with each other. And accordingly, they should be planning out in a manner, a comprehensive, not 5-year plan. 5-year plan doesn't work. You should be planning for 50 years.
Absolutely. A very important point made, and I will come to you, Vikram. I mean, because we have so far discussed transportation and the various subsegments of that. But as Mr. Sharma initially talked about in his address, IT also plays IT and technology will play a very important role when we really look at a more integrated multimodal planning, as Asim was talking about. I mean, how do you think, the technology part can come in here, and who could be the owner to really ensure that, because there are various ministries still, and the civil aviation, railways, and now transportation ministry, how does the technology fit as an enabler for all three to really talk of a more integrated modal transportation way? Your views, Vikram, on that. And
Okay. To begin with, our successful connection with the orbit of Mars shows that we have the capability of having the right technology. But unfortunately, at the ground level, there seems to be a lot of reluctance in terms of adopting what could be the best practices in the world in terms of technology which could help us grow at a faster pace and address some of our key problems which have been highlighted even in this discussion. I will focus my reply more on the technology aspect of construction of infrastructure rather than the IT aspect of it, because I'm not an expert in that field.
Sure.
But in terms of construction of infrastructure, there are technologies available in the world which can help us in alleviating or addressing some of our key issues. For example, it was pointed out that land acquisition, environmental clearances, and financial constraints are problems, and of course the time that these projects take to be executed. Not that technology in its present form available anywhere in the world can alleviate or address all of these problems, but then technology in its present form can be brought into India and at least mitigate these problems to a large extent. I mean, for example, I would give you an example of a project. It's a greenfield airport project in Sikkim which is being constructed, which had been in the planning for a long time, but for various reasons of environment or financial considerations or just the challenge of constructing an airport in a difficult terrain like that, it was not being feasible. But finally the Airport Authority of India took the initiative and they took the challenge of looking at new alternative technology. So where they had to construct really high structures of about 80 to 100 meters high, and if you think of using conventional methods of construction there, you have to construct concrete structures which would be like really unthinkable. The cost of the project was going in excess of 1,000 crores and was unfeasible in terms of financial considerations. So the technology that they used enabled them to now initiate the construction at a cost of only 300 crores. It's a completely green solution, so you will not see a single concrete wall around, and there will be an airport runway available for the local state. So this is just one case in point. Similarly, there are, if we are talking about participation of Japan and China into infrastructure development in the country. These guys have demonstrated very clearly that how they have used technology to implement the quality infrastructure and at what pace. And this is something I think that is very key. I mean, we have to be mindful of the time that we take to implement infrastructure. Infrastructure which takes ages and ages. By the time we get there, the need for that is already over and the demand is for even more. So I think primarily the government as an enabler has to encourage the promotion and adoption of technology to the grassroots level, where even engineers on the field feel encouraged to go and experiment with something new which can benefit the country at large, I feel.
thanks, Vikram.
Sorry, can I retort?
Yeah, we have just few minutes, and I just want to leave the floor.
I fully agree with his the technology part, because that not only can mitigate the environmental issue and land policy, even cost overrun. That is the biggest problem presently in all infrastructure projects. So technology can
play a very good
role.
Okay, I think we have about 5 to 7 odd minutes. Okay, so probably we can have two questions. I think my request would be just identify yourself and please address, who you want to address the question with. No questions?
No.
I think people are waiting for lunch. Okay, so maybe I think we can just wrap up here. I think, thanks everyone. Any last comment?
I would like to talk about, we all talk about when we talked about the planning part of it. Now there is a huge cost of investment. Expecting that kind of investment coming in from only from the government sources means the speed of execution is also an important part. So we need a policy framework, a robust policy framework in all sectors. Once you plan it out right, and after that, in order to implement that, you need to have a friendly policy framework where a kind of a private or international investment can come in
Absolutely.
to execute the jobs, and then that is what brings in new technologies as well as further development. It has to be done at a quick pace. And execution related, those pain points and what we call our typical curbs regarding land acquisition and all those things, for that the government needs to take into account, and more participatory role from state governments as well as various other stakeholders will resolve that.
I think
that is what I would like to
So maybe I mean,
emphasize
just to have this thing, I think what comes out very clearly through this discussion of various experts is that still we are not addressing the planning issue to have a more holistic approach about the intermodal transportation that is required for a country in a holistic fashion. And somebody needs to really do that before we really start making these targets of ports, airports, roads separately, and taking logistics as an integral part of it. I think the technology can play a very important role. I mean, as we heard Vikram talking about it, there's a lot to learn from these international experience, and hopefully when Japan and China participates in some of the industrial corridors, railways that they're talking about, probably we would have some of those examples very well. We also obviously need a policy enabler, as Asim was talking about, so that I mean the entry for any international and the strategic player is very important and becomes much easier because the kind of investment that we are talking about will just not be done from a private sector in India alone. So with that, I will conclude this session here. Thanks for everyone, and thanks for a great panel. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. There is one question.
Sorry, from where?
Here, in the last.
Yeah. I think the last question, I mean, please identify yourself if you can just quickly address.
Good afternoon, myself Devarsh Kumar. I'm from IIT Madras. The question here is for the whole panel. When we are talking about connecting transportation, is there any incentive for improving public local transportation? For example, where we see Hong Kong as a city which encourages 95% of the people are using public transportation, even though people can afford private transportation, yet there is an encouragement, there is an incentive for them to use public transportation because of the reliability and other things. So when we are let's say talking about Vision 2020, so is there any incentive for private users to switch over from using their private vehicles to public transportation?
Very good question.
Very good point. So basically how we are trying to tackle this issue in India, I mean, you have to disincentivize this private handling of the car or private transportation. So it's not a incentive for the mass mode, brother. It is disincentive for the private mode. That's the one issue. Second, a very serious thing is happening, and maybe you will listen in the next 10 days. That is some kind of encouragement for the model change from road to the coastal. So government is working on the project that if suppose as a stakeholder, if you want to move your goods, shift it from the road to the coastal or inland, then some kind of by way of some subsidy or some payment. So that's how we are incentivizing the model shift also. So that's the way we are handling it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to request the moderator and the panelists to please join us for a photo opportunity. And may I also thank you, sir, for making the session so interactive. Of course, we came to some great points. A few great questions were raised there. Thank you for your questions. And may I also once again request Sunita from Team ETH, please join us on stage and thank our moderator and our panelists. Gentlemen, I request you to please stay on for the next couple of minutes. Till then, Sunita, may I request you to join us for a photo opportunity nevertheless. I'd like to request Sunita to please join us for a photo opportunity, and of course post which we'll do a memento presentation. Thank you so very much. Sunita, may I request you to please present with a token of appreciation to each one of our panelists. Thank you, sir. Mr. Aggarwal, for moderating the session. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so very much, Sunita. Thank you, gentlemen. Please take a